Hey, bestie. That was a horrible way to enter this video. This video is gonna be me talking about God again. I know the other one ended up being like 40 minutes. I'm gonna be reading my Bible study. I'm gonna be reading my Bible. If that kind of content makes you uncomfortable, first of all, you got a demon. First of all, if you don't believe me, try and say Jesus is Lord. Try and say Jesus is your Lord and Savior. If you can't, you in trouble. And you might think I'm nuts, but there's been people out there couldn't say the word Jesus. They were prayed for, then they could say it. I've heard that happen many, many times. I wasn't one of the people in the room. I wasn't one of the people around. But I really hope people ain't gonna lie about something like that, because that'll get you sent straight to hell. Anyways, speaking of, he saw what you did. He saw what I did too. It's okay. So I always have this marked to my last one, but we're gonna go forward to Esther, and Esther is one that I have never looked into. Esther is one that I've never known about. I do like the picture on the opposite side. It's beautiful. It's like a grassy knoll. Courage, God's providence. Courage is, something that people think a lot of Christians don't have. A lot of people think we hide behind God. And I'm not a perfect Christian, okay? I curse. There's times where I lie. There's times where I do things I'm not supposed to do, okay? You don't have to look at me as a role model. You don't have to look at me as perfect. You don't have to see me as anything if you don't want to. And you don't have to watch this if you don't want to. But this is me learning about the Bible as well. So, I skipped ahead. How did I skip ahead? Okay, the story of Esther. And I'm going to read this first, and then I'm going to read the verses it tells me to in the Bible. So it's going to be key moment, Esther 4 through 7, Esther 1 through 10. Okay, the full reading. The story of Esther is about a woman whose life was caught up in circumstances and trauma bigger than herself, who acted with courage to save her people, and amidst it all shines a light on a God working behind the scenes. And there's a lot of people who have been talking about on TikTok how women's prayers are always answered in the Bible. I haven't read the Bible front to back, so I don't know how many examples of that there are. But yeah. Esther's story was historically conceived to recount the significance of the Jewish festival, Purim. Purim can be translated to lots, a form of decision-making that appears to be made by chance. This quality shapes much of the story of Esther. Celebrating the mysterious intermingling of chance and divine providence. So courage is something that you have to have during hard times, but providence is unless I'm thinking of it wrong, it's like peacefulness, right? I don't know. I don't know if I'm, like a peacefulness, but you're in the hands of God. Does that make sense? That's kind of how my brain thinks of it. I could be wrong. The story begins with Esther being plucked out from under the care of her uncle, Mordecai, and placed in the fortress of Susa, getting prepared to be presented to King Xerxes? I don't know if I can zoom in enough, but can you see that? You can kind of see it. Xerxes. I'm going to say Xerxes. I could be wrong. If that's not how it's pronounced, leave it in the comments. I don't know. King Xerxes as a potential wife. The preparation is traumatic. She has no choice and no authority in the circumstance. And Mordecai, aware that her Jewish nationality could put her in danger in the king's courts, advises her to keep her heritage a secret. So there she is, without her family, disconnected from her own people, and without any choice, being presented, amongst many other women, to King Xerxes. I could just say King X, but that sounds disrespectful to me. To everyone's surprise, King Xerxes not only favors Esther, but makes her the queen. What are the odds? Here in the story, we're introduced to another character, Haman, who is promoted as the most powerful official in the empire. After a tense encounter And feeling disrespected by Mordecai, Haman hatches a plot to destroy the Jewish people. I also wanna kind of reference like how people are acting towards Jewish people now. Yes, I understand. This is my opinion on this, and I know that I shouldn't be injecting politics or nowadays into what I'm reading here, right? But people are treating Jewish people poorly right now. Like, people hate Jewish people. Here's the thing. I do think there is a lot of different types of Jewish people. I don't think they are all the same kind of Jewish people that came from biblical times. I don't think they all came from that. But I think the ones who are actually Jewish should be respected. They don't deserve the anti-Semitism. Like, stuff that's happening over in another country that you and I only see news footage of should not be something we try to dictate. Because there are countries that post news footage of us, and other countries think ridiculous things about us because they see that news and that's all they see. And that's not everything that's going on in America. That's not everything that's going on over there. We can't sit there and go, oh, well, they should be doing this or they should be doing that. We don't know their traditions. We don't know their values. We don't know the entire reasoning behind that war and those exchanges. We just know what the news tells us or what we can look up online. And it may not all be factual. Before you sit there and pass judgment on an entire country, an entire race of people, please realize those things. That's all I'm saying. But anyways. After a tense encounter feeling disrespected by Mordecai, Haman hatches a plot to destroy the Jewish people. He brings his plan to the king, alleging the Jewish people refuse to follow the king's laws. King Xerxes agrees with Haman and signs a decree, declaring a day in the future as the day all the Jewish people in the Russian Empire should be killed. Where is Esther in all this? Well, she's unaware. The decree was signed. When she hears her uncle Mordecai is in distress, she sends to find out why. She finds out her people who are courageously resisting the captivity are now set to be killed by the king. In step with the spirit of her community, she conceives of a plan to resist this order, but it requires her to willingly put herself in danger in the court. No one, including the queen, is allowed to enter the king's court uninvited. Seeing the dangerous circumstances in front of her, Esther asks Mordecai to gather their people to fast and pray for her as she prepares to present herself before the king. While her people are fasting, Esther devises a plan to set up a situation where she can persuade the king to save her people, incriminating Haman in the process. During the second feast she requests, while they were all drinking wine, Esther reveals it is her people that are set to be killed, and that Haman instigated it all. Okay, there's Esther. I just want to make sure I have it. 686. I'll use anything for a bookmark. There we go. Right to it. Instigated it all. Esther is, in that moment, risked her life by identifying herself as a member of the people set to be killed. She chances vulnerability in the hope that it would change the mind of the king, and it does. The story ends on a triumphant note, that her uncle Mordecai being put into a position of power, and her people gaining the right to fight for themselves. Esther began this story in a place of trauma. She had no choice, no authority, and was disconnected from her people. The odds were stacked against her and her community, but this story ends with a resilient tone. Though her people still faced many challenges of captivity, her commitment to her community saved the lives of her people, keeping them from experiencing collective trauma, death. Where is God in all of this? In all of its twists and turns, God goes unmentioned in the story. This might seem strange at first for something within the biblical canon, but here lies its brilliance. Through all its twists, turns, and chance-filled moments lies a picture of God, working behind the scenes, setting up salvation for the Jewish people. Today, looking to Esther as a guide, we see courage is something that simultaneously takes vulnerability, community, and time. The story reminds us of all of the communities faced with injustice to recent history who turned to their own for support. Over many years, women with Esther's qualities courageously fought to gain the right to vote in the United States in the 20s. In the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s, many black Americans organized their communities, fighting for a more inclusive society. These courageous movements did not happen overnight. It took a great amount of commitment and support from one another. So people who get impatient when things aren't changing in the world, please realize that nothing that you learned about in history took 2 seconds. And in order for something to change, people have to find the problem, and then they also have to find the solution. Right now I'm dealing with a situation at work, and I'm not going to say the specifics, but it's something that I've been very stressed about. I've had a lot of anxiety about it, and I'm not saying this to bring it back to myself. It's just something that I relate to this in this moment, and maybe, I had no idea this is what I was going to be reading today. This is the first time I've opened my Bible since I did that video. So, and that's bad. That's bad, I know, because it's been months. But I did not know this is the story we were touching on. I didn't even know Esther's story. I didn't know what her significance was. I knew her name was mentioned a lot when it comes to the women of the Bible, but I didn't know this specifically. But right now with that situation at work, it's something where I was afraid to bring it to anyone's attention because I felt that I could get in trouble, even though technically I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just trying to get my work done, and I'm having problems with certain aspects of that. And it's not my fault, but I was worried that they would immediately tell me, okay then, bye, we'll just go find somebody who can. And I'm not going to say specifics again, but I'm just going to try and deal with it and talk to the right people and hope it goes well and hope something is fixed, because it can't just be... First of all, it wasn't just me having this problem. Now, the person who was also having this problem, tomorrow is their last day. And I know they're not going to open their mouth or say anything tomorrow. They're not going to approach anybody or say anything because it's their last day. They're at the age of retirement. I don't expect them to do that. But I cannot continue to work somewhere where I'm having this particular issue. This is not... I can't do it. And although I have severe anxiety, and every time I try and talk about something like this with authority figures, I tear up and I feel crazy. And I think of the worst case scenario. I know that in a way, me opening this in the Bible to this particular story is God letting me know that no matter what happens, He's there. That's how this feels to me. I'm trying not to tear up right now because God's there. I can feel it. I can feel Jesus telling me, I'm there. And I'm not perfect. I sin, I make mistakes. I say horrible things. When I get... And I know that I seem like a crybaby right now. 1, I'm on my period. 2, Jesus always moves me. You know what I mean? When I think of how I'm just another person, but God communicates with me, and I know He's real, and I know He's there, and I feel bad for people that don't know God. But I know that in a way this is Jesus trying to convey to me that He's there through everything. And it's gonna be okay. I'm not gonna be stuck where I am right now forever. But courage is something that people think of in one way, right? People think courage is just, and you're stoic, and you're stuck, and you're just stiff, and you're unwavering. But courage probably a lot of times includes tears, sadness, depression, late nights, things that people would see as bad or not courageous or weaknesses, you know? And sometimes it's your body kind of it's like your brain trying to figure things out because you want to do the right thing, but you also have, as human beings who grew up in like the modern age, we have this thing with instant gratification because of technology, right? So when something isn't fixed right away, our bodies go into, okay, stuck here forever now. So our brain goes, we need to do something about this right now. But sometimes things don't work that way. Sometimes things take time, they take persistence, they take slow progress, because sometimes if you rush through something and try and fix it quickly, you don't think about every avenue that you could take to fix it. You just fix it right now. That's it. You can tape the hole that's on the pipe that runs your main water into your house. You could tape that with duct tape. You could put a piece of chewing gum over that hole. Or you could shut the water off, drain the pipe, and replace the piece of pipe. Because if you just put a piece of tape over that, a piece of Flex Seal tape, a piece of gum, that hole's going to come back. And chances are, the pressure's going to build up, and it's going to come back worse. It's going to slowly crack the entire pipe. You're going to have a lot of problems. You're going to have a leak. A worse leak. That's just the quickest example I can think of. But, back to this. Okay, so, over years, women with Esther's qualities courageously fought to gain the right to vote in the United States in the 1920s. In the Civil Rights Movement in the 50s and 60s, black Americans organized their communities, fighting for a more inclusive society. And I'm not going to get into that because people still say America is very racist. And there are racist people in America. There are racist people in America who have unfortunately been allowed to rise to power. And I'm not talking about Trump. I'm talking about people who are like cops and congressmen and congresswomen and things like that. And I'm not always talking about white people when I say racist either, because I've seen and heard things come out of people's mouths of all races that is racist towards somebody, whether it's white people or somebody else. People like to believe that racism simply exists between white people and black people. Or black people and white people, whichever direction it's going in. But if you've played in a video game lobby, you know better. Anyways, that's all I'm going to say. Fighting for a more inclusive society. These courageous movements did not happen overnight. It took a great amount of commitment and support from one another. Esther went through a multi-day process to build up the courage to speak up. She asked for her community's help through fasting and prayer. And she bided her time until the right moment came up to ask the question. It causes us to ponder, how can we give ourselves the same luxury when trying to make hard decisions? Do we go to our communities for support? Do we give ourselves time to figure out the best way forward? Do we remember our values and what's at stake? Because, and it's weird because I'm reading this and I just kind of said that where, you can't rush into something, especially if it's something important. You want to do it the right way. And sometimes you feel that you don't have the time to look into certain things like you want to. Like, you wish you had a couple weeks to fix something. You wish you had a couple more days to fix something, and you don't. Sometimes you don't have the time. But in that instance, you fix it as well as you can at the time, and you keep it in the back of your mind and think about it, because you know eventually you're going to have to come back to it. So you still do kind of have time in those instances. Do we remember our values and what's at stake? Hopefully in tough situations you try to keep your values in mind. Esther's story is compelling because of how much divine chance is embedded in the narrative. She just happened to become a queen, who heard about a plot to kill her people, and had enough favor with the king to do something about it in the midst of seemingly random occurrences. God was at work behind the scenes setting up liberation. As we ponder on our lives today, there is possibly beneath the surface, God is setting us up for something great. The question is, do we have eyes to see it? Now here's the thing, yes, it says that God isn't mentioned, but it's also saying how God was behind the scenes. It is interesting, because she was put in a place where she was in a traumatic situation where she was going to be and I don't know how old Esther was. Does it say how old she is? I think it just says that she's going to be like a arranged marriage or whatever, right? So that's traumatizing. And then she finds out that the people that she's part of are going to be killed, right? If anybody else would have been picked by the king, there was nothing she would have been able to do. But if somebody else had been chosen, would Mordecai have come in contact with Haman? Would Haman have felt disrespected by somebody else's family? Or did Haman always have a grudge against Jewish people? I'm going to read the actual verses and see how much it talks about it and how well I understand them. Then I'm going to... It's hot in here, I'm not going to lie. Then I'm going to do the rest of this. This is getting to be very long, and I apologize. So, Esther 4 through 7 is the key moment, but Esther 1 through 10 is the entirety. So, now we come to the book of Esther. Now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus, this is Ahasuerus, which reigned from India even into Ethiopia over 107 and 20 provinces. That in those days when the king Ahasuerus sat on the I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan, the palace. In the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast unto all his princes, and his servants. The power of Persia and Media, the nobles and princes of the provinces being before him. When he shewed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the honor of his excellent majesty many days, even 180 days. And when these days were expired, the king made a feast unto all the people that were present in the Shushan the palace, both unto great and small, 7 days in the court of the garden of the king's palace, where were white, green, and blue hangings, fastened with cords of line, fine linen, and purple. I feel like I'm not... This doesn't make sense with this. Unless they want me to read all of... Okay, so I'm going to try reading chapter 4 to chapter 7. This is going to be a lot of reading for me. I apologize if I mess up any names. When Mordecai perceived all that was done, Mordecai rent his clothes and put on sackcloth with ashes, and went out into the midst of the city, and cried with a loud and bitter cry, and came even before the king's gate, for none might enter into the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. And in every province, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, there was great mourning among the Jews, and fasting, and weeping, and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. So Esther's maids and her chamberlains came and told it to her. Then was the queen exceedingly grieved, and she sent raiment to clothe Mordecai, and to take away his sackcloth from him, but he received it not. Then called Esther for Hattash, one of the king's chamberlains, whom he had appointed to attend upon her, and gave him a commandment to Mordecai to know that it was, and why it was. So Hattash went forth to Mordecai unto the street of the city, which was before the king's gate, and Mordecai told him of all that had happened unto him, and of the sum of money that Haman had promised to pay to the king's treasuries for the Jews to destroy them. Also he gave him the copy of the writing of the decree that was given to Shushan to destroy them, to shew it unto Esther, and to declare it unto her, and to change her, that she should go unto the king to make supplication unto him, and to make request before him for her people. And Hattash, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I apologize if I'm not. Hattash came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Again Esther spake unto Hattash, and gave him commandment unto Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces Do know that whosoever, whether man or woman, shall come unto the king into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his to put him to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come in unto the king these 30 days. And they told to Mordecai Esther's words. Then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, Think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall the enlargement of deliverance arise in the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Then Esther bade them return Mordecai this answer. Go gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise, and so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law, and if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way, and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. Now it came to pass on the 3rd day that Esther put on her royal apparel, and stood in the inner court of the king's house over against the king's house. And the king sat upon his royal throne in the royal house, over against the gate of the house. And it was so, when the king saw Esther the queen standing in the court, that she obtained favor in his sight, and the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther drew near and touched the top of the scepter. Then said the king unto her, What wilt thou, Queen Esther, and what is thy request? It shall be even given thee to the half of the kingdom. And Esther answered, If it seem good unto the king, let the king and Haman come to this day unto the banquet that I have prepared for him. Then the king said, Cause Haman to make haste, that he may do as Esther hath said. So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. And the king said unto Esther at the banquet of wine, What is thy petition? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? Even the half of the kingdom it shall be performed. Then answered Esther and said, My petition and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my petition, and to perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I shall prepare for them, and I will do tomorrow as the king hath said. Then went Haman forth that day joyful with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he stood not up, nor moved for him, he was full of indignation against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman refrained himself, and when he came home, he sent and called for his friends, and Zeresh his wife. And Haman told them of the glory of his riches, and the multitude of his children, and all the things wherein the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the princes and servants of the king. Haman said moreover, Yet Esther the queen did let no man come in with the king unto the banquet that she had prepared by myself, and tomorrow am I invited unto her also with the king. Yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Then said Zeresh his wife and all his friends unto him, Let a gallows be made of 50 cubits high, and tomorrow speak thou unto the king, that Mordecai may be hanged therein. Then go thou in merrily with the king unto the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, and he caused the gallows to be made. On that night could not the king sleep, and he commanded to bring the book of records of the chronicles, and they were read before the king. And it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's chamberlains, the keepers of the door, who sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus. And the king said, What honor and dignity hath been done to Mordecai for this? Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, There is nothing done for him. And the king said, Who is in the court? Now Haman was come into the outward court of the king's house, to speak unto the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. And the king's servants said unto him, Behold, Haman standeth in the court. And the king said, Let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said unto him, What shall be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart, to whom would the king delight to be honored more than to himself? And Haman answered the king, with the man whom the king delighted to honor. Let the royal apparel be brought which the king useth to wear, and the horse of the king rideth upon, and the crown royal which is set upon his head. And let this apparel and horse be delivered to the hand of the king's most noble princes, that they may array the man withal whom the king delighteth to honor, and bring him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaim before him, Thou shalt it be done to the man who the king delighteth to honor. When the king said to Haman, Make haste, and take the apparel and the horses as thou hast said, and do even so to Mordecai the Jew, that sitteth at the king's gate. Let nothing fail of all that thou hast spoken. Then took Haman the apparel and the horse, and arrayed Mordecai, and brought him on horseback to the street of the city, and proclaimed before him, Thou shalt it be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor. And Mordecai came again to the king's gate, but Haman hasted to his house mourning and having his head covered. And Haman told Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends everything that had befallen him. Then said his wise men and Zeresh, his wife, unto him, If Mordecai be of the seed of the Jews, before whom thou hast begun to fall, thou shalt not prevail against him, but shall surely fall before him. And while they were yet talking with him, came the king's chamberlains, and hasted to bring Haman unto the banquet which Esther had prepared. So the king and Haman came to the banquet with Esther, the queen, and the king said again unto Esther on the second day at the banquet. This is really long. I didn't think it would be. At the banquet of wine, what is thy petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? And it shall be performed, even to the half of the kingdom. Then Esther the queen answered and said, If I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. But if we had been sold for bondmen and bondwomen, bound men and bound women, is it bond or bound? It's B-O-N-D, so probably bond. Bondmen and bondwomen, I had held my tongue, although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage. Then the king Ahasuerus answered and said unto Esther the queen, Who is he, and where is he, that durst presume in his heart to do so? And Esther said, The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. And the king, arising from the banquet of wine, in his wrath went into the palace garden, and Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther the queen, for he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. Then the king returned out of the palace garden into the place of the banquet of wine, and Haman was fallen upon the bed whereon Esther was. Then said the king, Will he force the queen also before me in the house? As the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. And Arwanah, one of the chamberlains, said before the king, Behold also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who had spoke good for the king, standeth in the house of Haman. Then the king said, Hang him thereon. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's wrath pacified. On that day did the king Ahasuerus give the house of Haman and the Jews' enemy unto Esther, the queen. And Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told what he was unto her. And the king took off his ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it unto Mordecai. And Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. And Esther spake yet again before the king, and fell down at his feet, and besought him with tears to put away the mischief of Haman, the Agagite, and his device that he had devised against the Jews. Then the king held out the golden scepter toward Esther. So Esther arose and stood before the king, and said, If it please the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and the thing seem right before the king, and I be pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to reverse the letters devised by Haman, and son of Hammedetha, the Agagite, which he wrote to destroy the Jews which are in all the king's provinces. For how can I endure to see the evil that shall come unto my people? Or how can I endure to see the destruction of my kindred? Then the king Ahasuerus said unto Esther the queen, and to Mordecai the Jew, Behold, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and him they have hanged upon the gallows, because he had his hand upon the Jews. Write ye also for the Jews, as it liketh you in the king's name. Seal it with the king's ring. For the writing which is written in the king's name, and sealed with the king's ring, may no man reverse. Then were the king's scribes called at the time in the 3rd month, that is the month Sivan, on the 23rd day therefore, and it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded unto the Jews, and to the lieutenants, and the deputies, and rulers of the provinces which are from India unto Ethiopia, 127 provinces. Unto every province according to the writing thereof, and unto every people of their language, and to the Jews according to their writing and according to their language. And he wrote in the king Ahasuerus' name, and it sealed it with the king's ring, and sent letters by post on horseback, and riders on mules, camels, and young dromedaries, wherein the king granted the Jews which were in every city to gather themselves together, and to stand for their life, to destroy, to slay, and to cause to perish all the power of the people and province that would assault them, both little ones and women, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. Upon one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, namely upon the 19th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, the copy of the writing for a commandment to be given to every province was published unto all people, and that the Jews should be ready against the day to avenge themselves on their enemies. I hope I'm reading all this right. So the post that rode upon mules and camels went out, being hastened and pressed on by the king's commandment, and the decree was given at Shushan the palace. And Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal apparel of blue and white, and with a great crown of gold, and with a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. The Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor, and in every province and in every city, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast and a good day. And many of the people of the land became Jews, for the fear of the Jews fell upon them. Now in the 12th month, that is, the month Adar, on the 13th day of the same, when the king's commandment and his decree drew near to be put in execution, in the day that the enemies of the Jews hoped to have power over them, though it was turned to the contrary, and the Jews had rule over them that hated them, the Jews gathered themselves together in their cities throughout all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, to lay hand on such as sought their hurt, and no man could withstand them. For the fear of them fell upon all people, and all the rulers of the province, and the lieutenants, and the deputies, and the officers of the king helped the Jews, because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. For Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame went out throughout all the provinces. For this man Mordecai waxed greater and greater. Thus the Jews smote all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, and slaughter and destruction did what they would unto those that hated them. And in Shushan the palace the Jews slew and destroyed 500 men. And Parshan, Datha, and Dalthon, and Aspata, and Portha, and Adalia, and Aridatha, and Parmashta, and Arisai, and Aridai, and Vajezatha, the 10 sons of Haman, the 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hamadetha, the enemy of the Jews, slew they, but on the spoil laid they not their hand. On that day the number of those that were slain in Shushan the palace was brought before the king, and the king said unto Esther the queen, The Jews have slain and destroyed 500 men in Shushan the palace, and the 10 sons of Haman. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now what is thy petition, and it shall be granted thee, or what is thy request further, it shall be done. Then said Esther, If it please the king, let it be granted to the Jews which are in Shushan to tomorrow also, according unto this day's decree, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged upon the gallows. And the king commanded it so to be done, and the decree was given at Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. For the Jews that were in Shushan gathered themselves together on the 14th day also of the month Adar, and slew 300 men at Shushan, but on the prey they laid not their hand. But the other Jews that were in the king's provinces gathered themselves together and stood for their lives, and had rest from their enemies, and slew for their foes 70 and 5,000, but they had laid not their hands on the prey. On the 13th day of the month Adar, and on the 14th day the same rested they, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. But the Jews that were at Shushan assembled together on the 13th day thereof, and on the 14th thereof, and on the 15th day of the same. They rested and made it a day of feasting and gladness. Therefore the Jews of the villages that dwell in the unwalled towns made the 14th day of the month Adar a day of gladness and feasting, and a good day, and of sending portions one to another. And Mordecai wrote these things and sent letters unto all the Jews that were in all the provinces, and King Ahasuerus both nigh and far, to establish this among them, and that they should keep the 14th of the month Adar, and the 15th day of the same yearly. As the days wherein the Jews rested in their enemies, and the month which was turned unto them from sorrow to joy, and from mourning into the good day, that they should make them days of feasting and joy, and of sending portions one to another, and gifts to the poor. I want to apologize right now to anybody who's more familiar with Scripture and more familiar with how to pronounce these names than I am, because if you've been reading along, it's probably been agony whenever I go to read the names, and I apologize. Because I don't mean disrespect to any of the people whose names they are or anything like that, which was turned them unto them from sorrow to joy, and from mourning into a good day, that they should make them days of feasting and joy, and sending portions one to another, and gifts to the poor. And the Jews undertook to do as they had begun, and as Mordecai had written unto them, because Haman the son of Hammedatha and Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had devised against the Jews to destroy them, had cast that is, the lot, to consume them, and to destroy them. But when Esther came before the king, he commanded by letters that his wicked device, which he devised against the Jews, should return upon his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged on the gallows. Wherefore they called these days Purim, after the name of the Pur. Therefore all the words of this letter, and all that which they had seen concerning this matter, and which had come unto them, the Jews ordained and took upon them, and upon their seed, and upon all such as joined themselves unto them, so as it should not fall, that they would keep these 2 days according to their writing, and according to their appointed time every year, and that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation, every family, every province, and every city, and that these days of Purim should not fail from among the Jews, nor the memorial of them perish from their seed. Then Esther the queen, the daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai the Jew, wrote with all authority to confirm this second letter of Purim. And he sent the letters unto all the Jews to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus, with words of peace and truth, to confirm these days of Purim in their times appointed, according as Mordecai the Jew and Esther the queen had enjoined them, and as they had decreed for themselves and for their seed the matters of the fastings and their cry. And the decree of Esther confirmed these matters of Purim, and it was written in the book. So I hope I made sense of that. I'm not good at reading like the biblical names and everything. But now we're going to go back to this, and I know this video is very long. The other one was pretty long too, but it wasn't as long as this one's probably going to be. But where are we? So it says sit up straight, and this is the reflection part, right? Sit up straight, take a deep breath, using the art element on the previous page, which is this beautiful scene here. Take a moment to reflect on the story. I didn't read the entire thing, but I read most of it. Invite God to speak to you. Where do you hope God is working behind the scenes in your life? And I've already talked about that. So I'm going to write, for me personally, work, job, time, because the thing that I have going on at work right now relates to time, and I believe some of it is my fault with time management, but I also think that there's just not enough time to do what needs to be done, and that's just how it feels. Are there any circumstances in your life that you're scared of and need courage? I'm just going to put meeting, because this is the most forefrontal thing in my mind. It's supposed to be like me and like people having a meeting about it, and I'm worried that I'm going to be ganged up on, even though I know that that's not exactly how it's supposed to happen. How can you connect to community around you in difficult circumstances? And how I've been doing that lately, and it's probably not a good thing, is venting or gossiping, but it's mostly venting about my problems. So I'm going to write venting, and not always good, because it's not. Where do you have and I'm not advocating for gossiping or venting, by the way. I just said it wasn't good and it could be toxic. Where do you have a platform to speak up for others in your life? This could be an example of a platform. My TikTok, or even just if I see something being wrong. And part of the reason that I'm trying to correct what's going on at work is because if they hire somebody to do the days that I'm not there, my days off, that person's probably not going to stay because they're going to be overworked and stuff like me. So I'm going to say work again. And I know it doesn't make any sense, but God who works behind the scenes, and this says pray. God who works behind the scenes, grant me the courage of Esther. Give me eyes to see where I can join in with the love of God for all people. Amen. And some of the prayers that they have at the end of these are a lot longer. But that one was kind of short. Maybe because the lesson was a little longer. I don't know. But yeah. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that it wasn't too long for you. I hope that it wasn't too preachy for you. Thank you for watching as always. I know I don't post very much anymore, but I feel like I'm either at work or sleeping or, you know, just kind of all over the place, and it's very hot out. So I'm going to go back to sitting in the AC. The reason I'm not sitting in the AC right now is because I wanted you to be able to hear me, especially when I'm talking about something as important as Jesus and God and the Bible. So thank you for watching. Thank you for watching any of the videos on my channel. I need to post other content as well. I just don't have a lot going on in my life right now. So thank you.